SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
This is Jane Burkhart from Starward Vacations. As a preferred Sandals Beaches agency, our professional travel planning services are free to our clients. We can help find the best Sandals or Beaches resort that fits your budget. Starward Vacations, call 662-429-1000.
Middays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. Middays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. Hello. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Midday Super Talk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music. Morning there, Rhino.
Howdy.
I trust you had an enjoyable extended weekend. How was it?
It wasn't quite long enough, but that's only because I took too many naps.
Well, there's nothing wrong with taking some naps, a little downtime, refresh, re-energize, refuel, all the various verbs and adverbs associated with a little vacation. Good for you. We got Gordon Fellows on the program today. He, of course, the president of the Mississippi Bankers Association. He'll join us at 11:05. And then at 12:05, kicking off hour 3 of Middays, it's Richard Roberson, President and CEO of the Mississippi Hospital Association, and Dr. Kim Hoover, President and CEO of the Mississippi Hospital Association's Education Foundation. So we'll get some good reports and discussion with those individuals today. Looking forward to that. The markets are mixed. The Dow is actually in the green, doing quite well. It's off its highs of the session. It's up about 360 points. It has been up as much as 450 this morning. But it's the chip makers over there on the NASDAQ. Man, when you see a single stock that's down $88 in a day, that's big time. Big chip sell-off is deepening today. Taiwan Semiconductor, Broadcom, AMD, Micron, NVIDIA, all down rather significantly. There's concerns about China. Rhino, you've seen this. They're making a headway in the artificial intelligence race. There's concerns there. And they're employing the same tactics they do in other industries. They just flood some particular industry. In this case, it's AI and chip making with government money.
But it seems like for the first time since their rise to prominence and their attempt to gain world power, they're having to seriously think about where they put the government largesse.
That's true.
Because they're having to prop up failing real estate markets that have been the topic of speculation for a decade now, with entire cities of skyscrapers essentially empty. Might have 500 people living in a city that looks like it should hold 50,000. So they're having to prop up that part of that sector of their economy. And they're speed running what we're dealing with as far as an aging population with an outsized reliance on the government, whether that be like in America, we've got Medicare, we've got Social Security, we've got all these things that deal with retirees and the aged.
Right. Yep.
And how that's going to be a problem in the future because none of it was designed to handle a gigantic aged population. Well, China, the only way you really have a retirement is if you work for the government, and the government just keeps getting bigger, and their population's not getting any younger. They're experiencing worse side effects of the social revolution than we are, as far as the decline in birth rate.
Japan as well, of course. I mean,
Japan's worse off than China, but China's worse off than America.
Right. And Japan's been in this conundrum for a while, and they're still trying to figure out how to dig out of it. The bottom line is they got way more old people that are on the government payroll, if you will, than they do young people working and funding their retirement. And because you get to a point where you just physically can't work, and if you don't have some income somewhere, somehow coming in, then you just die. I mean, you just wilt away and die. So we're not going to do that. Their society's not going to do that. We're, generally speaking, not going to do that here. But it is exacerbated in China. Part of the problem, as you know, is they lie about it, and you don't know. You have to really dig some of that information you just shared. You have to dig to even understand that and be enlightened and made aware of that. But they're making some strides in chip making, and there are concerns about the government's involvement in that, talking about the Chinese government's involvement in that. And this is creating competition for U.S. chip makers, and that's a problem. And then it's this race for technical superiority in AI and quantum computing, and that's causing problems. And over here, we've got strange politics making strange bedfellows in that people on the left and the right, even the far left and the far right, are kind of joining forces in opposition to AI, to technology, certainly to data centers. And it seems like every day data centers get blamed for something else. That's like, what? Where'd you come up with that? So, but that's a problem, and they are investing heavily is China. I mean, they're supercharging their AI spending, and it's government money infused into their industry. And so that's the reason, bottom line, is how we started this, is that the technology companies, in particular the chip stocks, are selling off today. Now,
it depends on who you ask as to how that matters, because on one side, if China is becoming more self-reliant on chip manufacturing and not having to import any chips, then they're less inclined to need to invade Taiwan.
Yes.
But if they are using the chip manufacturing and AI progress as a last-gasp desperation attempt to try to pull themselves out of the quagmire they've built with their real estate, with their aging population of retirees, then it would look like it's more likely they would invade Taiwan, because they would need another infusion of money once this one runs out.
Here's what's interesting. Apple is actually doing pretty well. Remember earlier in the year, Rhino, all the smart investment analysts, financial analysts, advisors, investment bankers, that whole industry, I don't know about Apple. They just don't seem to have a cohesive AI strategy, right? That's what you were hearing. And Apple sold off. Except, here's the truth. And now it's up today, by the way. While these other stocks are trending downward that we talked about, the chip stocks in particular, here's why. You still got to have hardware. To use that AI stuff and all those other tools, you got to have a device. So Apple continues to push those out. They sell a jag of them, obviously. And once again, have you seen this? Because of the sell-off in NVIDIA, Apple's worth more than NVIDIA. They have returned to the throne as the world's most valuable company. It's absolutely incredible to think about its beginnings with Steve Jobs and Wozniak back when they were at Hewlett-Packard. Steve Jobs famously said, "People don't know what they need until I tell them." And he wasn't being arrogant. He was being honest. He just had the ability to envision and innovate tools that the average person just couldn't even comprehend. It's incredible. But that's what's going on the markets. The good news, though, it looks like a bit of stability has been introduced for what that's worth into the Middle East. And so oil is down today. In fact, last I checked, it was about $81 a barrel, which is good news. So here's what I noticed, though. The price of regular gas has trended downward a little bit, but diesel went up. I'm not sure I totally understand that, but crude, yeah, it's $80 down $2.42 today. But, man, I feel for the folks buying diesel because it's, $5.30 a gallon, I think, coming right back in the Element Well studio.
Hi, this is Mark.
We're rolling. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
What? This is so
Awesome. On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
So the president says that Iran desperately wants to make a deal, and he is threatening, quote, strong, end quote, action if the talks fail. He says we can take out power plants, bridges, at the blink of an eye. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but in haste, I think was the point, not to challenge the United States. And so that's got folks feeling a little better about the strait and the movement of oil through it. That's why the price of oil is down. The volatility is incredible, isn't it, Ryan? If you look at a chart since the attacks began in February, I mean, it's just up, down, up, down, up, down. I'm talking about the price of oil. And just traders reacting to the latest news every day, it seems like. Senator Kennedy from Louisiana, he emphasized yesterday that the United States should stay in this fight and eliminate Iran's nuclear ambitions, even if it takes several months, which he kind of predicted it would. And he said the elevated price of fuel is a small price to pay to rid the world of this threat, this menace, that being this prehistoric, it feels like, regime and their nuclear ambitions. So that's where we are with respect to that. We got some other things to get to as well, in the state as well as at the national level. But let's start with the Democrats had a little convention in Maine over the weekend. The Maine Democrats, they got their man. That's Troy Jackson. That is who they nominated to replace Graham Plattner, who dropped out of the race amid just a flurry of crazy stuff in that guy's background. And so this guy, honestly, a former state senator, comes from a logging family. I would say he's not much better in terms of his ideology. He wants Medicare for all. That absolutely is the holy grail, is it not, Rhino, for Democrats? And you could argue it has been since the 90s when Hillary Clinton, who could forget Hillary Care, which was part of one of Bill Clinton's campaigns, that was immediately squashed, even by the Democrat Party, honestly. Not anymore, they fully embrace it. It does appear to be their trophy, their holy grail. Every one of these candidates, even the more traditional moderate Democrats, if there is such a thing.
That's why the Democrat Party is struggling to find a unifying front runner for their presidential aspirations, because there's too much video evidence of the old guard sounding like the far right.
That's true.
By today's leftist standards. And the young guns all have to try to distance themselves from the insanity of 2020.
I think that's right.
So when they're
struggling with that, though.
They're stuck between a bunch of old people in their party that sound like the far right, according to the leftists of the party, and a whole bunch of youngins that just had diarrhea of the mouth and said the most asinine things to get the approval of the stupidest people.
That is something that they are having to grapple with. It was very appropriately described. He wants also to lower the cost of prescription drugs, tax cuts for the working class. This, of course, among the list of priorities of all Democrats, regardless of whether or not they're Democrat, socialist. I don't even know what that means. You're a damn socialist. I don't know why they have to put the word Democratic in front of it.
Because then they can try the argument of, well, we haven't tried it this way.
Oh, I see.
And you have the observational reality of socialism and communism doesn't work at scale above about 25 people.
It's so true. Abolishing immigration and customs enforcement, ending U.S. support for Israel, and banning members of Congress from trading stocks. That is the platform of Maine's Troy Jackson. He will take on Republican incumbent Senator Susan Collins in the general election this November. And to your point, this is what I think is a big problem for the Democrats. They can't seem to shake some of the crazy social and cultural ideology that's just ingrained in their agenda. And here's an example. There's a hospital that's still promoting DEI and trans ideology despite federal funding challenges, and that's Rush University Medical Center. And this is in Illinois, and they just can't seem to shake it. Rush University's Children's Hospital's pediatric department currently conducts department-wide DEI retreats as part of a broader anti-racism and LGBTQ curricula, according to the department's website. Can't seem to shake it, and this is a hospital group in Chicago, by the way. So they do it in a more quiet fashion, so as to, I guess, to think nobody will figure it out and find out. But you know what happens? Inevitably, somebody leaks it or somebody's exposed to it that wants to share it. And that's how it ends up making news. One of the concerns that I've expressed about the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which was honestly a godsend, and here's what I mean by that. Had we not extended the Trump tax cuts from 2017, we would have reverted to the Barack Obama tax environment, and that would have been devastating for the economy, not to mention that folks' tax bills would have gone up and they'd have less money. Now, a lot of people think that, it wouldn't affect me, I don't make enough money. That's simply not true. They need to do the math. And I'm certainly not suggesting everybody needs to turn into a tax calculation professional. But I am saying that if you look at taxes under Obama, even for the middle class, lower incomes, taxes after the 2017 tax cuts, even though the Democrats refused to acknowledge it, taxes did go down for those in the lower income. Now, my concern always was you'd have to look at that and say, from a legislative perspective, that's the president's biggest victory. No doubt about it. Got that through, signed into law July 4th, 2025. Big deal. Here's the problem. Most people don't feel it. And it's because what it did first and foremost was just continue what we already had. So it's not like, wow, the day before it was signed into law, this is what my net pay was, and the day after, it went up. That didn't happen. That did in 2017. The exception would be those who have tip income or overtime income. That was an enhancement and something that was added to the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. But a new Politico poll finds that nearly half of Americans say they can't even explain the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and those who can are much more likely to say it's helped others, including the wealthy, but not them. So I would suggest that this means the Democrats are probably doing a better job of defining the legislation as tax breaks for the rich and the billionaires than are Republicans in explaining the value, the benefit to those who aren't billionaires, who aren't in the top echelon of income earners. I think their messaging could improve there, and maybe it's just a simple chart. Here's what it was before, 2 or 3 typical kind of cases. Here's what it is after. And that's a concern because that is a major legislative victory that might not provide a lot of political leverage and value at the ballot box come this fall. The other major victory, in my view, for the president is shutting down the border. Now, that didn't require any legislation. But at this point, you'd have to look, I think, at those two accomplishments, certainly relative to the prior president in Joe Biden. Border shut down. Lots of people have self-deported. Others have been removed from the country. And then passing this One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Listen.
Attention, adoring fans. It's time for
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
So I think, just back to what we were talking about, I think the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, there's no way to know, obviously, what would have happened had President Trump not been elected and Republicans gained control of the House, of course, the Senate, sufficient to extend the 2017 tax cuts. There's no way to know what would have happened if Kamala Harris, God forbid, would have been elected. Democrats have control. And even if they, just say, control the House, not the Senate, but they have the White House, and thus it's locked up, stalemate, can't get anything through, the individual tax provisions of the 2017 Trump tax cuts were going to expire, we would have reverted back to the Obama-era tax environment. And yes, your paychecks would have shown less net pay. That's just a fact. Not just the wealthy people. I'm talking about people making $30,000 a year. They would have had a deeper tax bite into their gross pay and thus less spending money, less net pay. We don't know. So it's one of those things where you don't know what you didn't have or what could have happened, and it's hard to leverage that politically. That's the only point I'm making. And this Politico poll is interesting in that, Rhino, I remember us talking about that months ago, that unfortunately we're just continuing what we already have. So it's not like, wow. I remember, for example, I know there's folks out there that are in my age range as well, when Ronald Reagan came in and started whacking at taxes. I distinctly remember my paycheck going up. Now, it wasn't much. I didn't make a lot, and it was the 80s, right? But I remember that. There's no doubt. It's like, wow, that's why I like this guy, because I got more take-home pay. But in this case, that didn't happen for most people. So they didn't really feel directly. And then the other thing I've discussed is the reigniting or the reinstating is a good word of the immediate expensing. And I know that's hard to connect that to your individual pay, but small businesses out there and large businesses, man, they are spending money on plant equipment like crazy. That's what's driving our economy big time, because they can write it all off. Now, that aggravates the heck out of the Democrats, because that's what causes situations where big companies just spend a bunch of money. Let's take the hyperscalers. And all of that is written off against their income in the year in which they made those investments, and thus they end up without a tax liability. And the Democrats, they misrepresent that. Well, they made a bunch of money but didn't pay any taxes because of loopholes. No, they spent a bunch of money, which went into the pockets in the coffers of the companies that make the stuff that they bought. They don't seem to acknowledge or understand that. But they see that as a loophole. No, it's not. It's just pulling forward what you would do through normal extended depreciation, writing off those asset purchases. But that's a huge thing that's affecting our economy that the average person just doesn't feel. They don't see. I get it. The Republicans, I think, have got their work cut out for them in selling that, especially in an environment where we're watching inflation still kind of too high for most people, and that's what folks are going to be focused on. The price of gas, price of diesel. So our friend Steve Lott, Representative Steve Lott, that has been on the program, was on last week. I was just talking about the price of diesel, $5.32, whereas the price, I just checked at national average, whereas the price of regular gas trending down because of the price of oil moving downward. And he said, yeah, it's just a supply problem. Global supply of diesel has tightened from natural gas to diesel generation to save some money. Oh, okay, got it. Plus, about to roll into winter heating oil season, which a lot of other countries still use diesel. Okay, which in turn affects the global commodity price. All right, well, that makes sense. So that's just a plain old supply and demand issue that's not related. But it's at this point in time, it's based on demand and supply in the next few months.
I mean, even on a perfect day, it's still going to be a demand and supply issue that is the difference between gas and diesel prices, because the refineries are predominantly producing gas. The amount of diesel produced at refineries is way less than the amount of gas produced at refineries.
Yeah. That's just standard market dynamics in economics at play there. I'm just saying that from a political perspective, nobody cares. You know what I mean? They pull up to the pump. Wow, it's $5.32 a gallon for diesel. I don't like that. And the natural knee-jerk reaction is, we got to change something. Problem is, you go from the old proverbial frying pan to the fire, right? So you're not really improving by changing, but that's the typical mindset of voters. I don't like the current situation. I got to change. Rusty on the C Spire text line says the big, beautiful bill helped me get a great big refund this past year. Curious about that, Rusty. Was that it would really be it could be based on the tips overtime or the increased standard deduction for seniors would be the case. Let us know. Curious about that. I got $1,000 more on taxes in February due to no tax on overtime. There you go. Now, the other thing you recall, Rhino, is that these adjustments that were made didn't kick in the tax withholding tables because it was a mid-year deal. Remember that? And so you were paying more in than you needed to for the back half of the year unless you made some adjustments in your withholding parameters, and that resulted in refunds. But that's done. Now everything's normalized, and the tax tables were updated to reflect all that. But you recall that mainly on the overtime and tip situation, that was going to, because that was retroactive to January 1, 26. So, yeah, makes sense. Let's see here. Gerard is from Mose. How about the financial shape of the DNC? Yeah, Mose, we talked about that yesterday. They got $2 million in debt, right? The DNC, they had meetings. You probably saw it. Shoes were being thrown. I don't think it was shoes. It was phones, I think, being thrown. They got at each other's throats and faces, and a lot of infighting in their party right now, struggling to raise money. Meanwhile, the Republicans are doing quite well, $130 million, I think, on hand in the party.
I would caution against that line of logic because, yes, the DNC as a machine has $2 million in debt.
Yeah.
What's the budget for all of the Ivy League institutions? What's the budget for the vast majority of mainstream media? There's a whole bunch of institutions that tote the water for the left, the leftists, the liberals, and the Democrats every day that ends in Y and twice on Sunday.
Yep.
So, yes, the DNC is floundering. They still have liberal institutions of both soft and real power that the right just doesn't have.
That's true. And so that doesn't require money. Right, I think it's the point you're making. They get the so-called earned media exposure. I absolutely agree, and I would caution to not underestimate the party, the Democrats, their candidates.
Just look at reporting on anything political for the last, decade. Every single major reporting error goes one direction, against the Republicans and for the Democrats.
Well, a case in point is what we've learned about Dr. Anthony lock him up forever and throw away the key Fauci. What a despicable little fool that dude is, huh? Now we know. Have you ever seen a greater narcissist, egotist than that guy?
Obama.
Maybe. We're taking a break in the Element Well studios. Yes, with Roundabout bumping us out of this segment. Don't forget it's Gordon Fellows at 11:05. He's president of the Mississippi Bankers Association.
Come on. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
All right, we are back
on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We're back with you in the Element Wealth studio on the C Spire text line. I love listening to you boys, and I know there are a lot of cheaters out there. I recently had to retire due to cancer, and I wish I could still work. I've paid way more into Social Security than I'll ever get out. I take offense when it's lumped in with welfare. Well, it's really not. I know that, Rhino, you're aware of this, that it is referred to as an entitlement, and a lot of people associate the word entitlement with welfare. It's not, folks. Entitlement simply means you're entitled to it. You paid into Social Security, you're entitled to receive benefits out. Thus, it is an entitlement. You're not entitled to welfare, honestly, in my view, not on the basis of having met certain criteria such as you do in Social Security, which means you got to pay into it for 40 quarters. Welfare, to qualify for that, it depends on the program, but in general, it's based on your household income and other personal circumstances. You could be disabled, blind, for example, and qualify for Medicaid if you have an income that's inside the threshold. That's welfare. You didn't pay anything into that. You're not entitled to that. The government over the decades created these programs and created the rules and the qualification criteria. If you meet those, you get money. So I would encourage you not to think that folks lump Social Security and Medicare in with the basket of welfare programs. They don't. Entitlement, don't let that confuse you. That simply means you are entitled. It's like a contract. You enter into a contract with the government. Hey, if I pay into this thing for so many years, I get money out. Simple as that.
I would offer one extra facet.
Okay.
Don't expect anybody born after, say, the ALF TV show came on the air to really give a rat's rear end about Social Security, because we're never going to see it.
Yeah, I agree. That's probably the case. But on the other hand, there's a side of me that says the Congress is not going to let the thing default. It's just not. It's would be political suicide. So if it means they have to go borrow a bunch of money. Now, what I will say is, with respect to Social Security, and I know I've explained this before, it is not a retirement program. It's insurance. So think about this. Probably everybody out there listening's got some form of insurance. Most people have multiple insurance plans, insurance coverages. If you own a home, you got homeowners insurance. You own a vehicle, in the state of Mississippi at least, you have to have, at a minimum, liability insurance. If you're in business, you got general liability coverage and a whole bunch of other coverage as well. So, and then you got health insurance. So you may pay a bunch into all of those various programs, but you only get money out when you file a claim. That's the agreement. So I give an example in my business. For 33 years, I paid workers' comp insurance. 0 claims. 0. Just paid it out. So what am I doing? Paying into the possibility that I might have a claim one day. Same with unemployment. I never had an employee file unemployment. But I paid a bunch of money. All businesses do. It's insurance. It's unemployment insurance. Social Security is Social Security insurance. That's how it was originally devised and developed, and it was just a protection against living to be 65 years old in poverty. That's what it was designed for. It was never, you pay a bunch of money in, we'll give you a bunch of money out. No, you're paying a bunch of money in as insurance, just like you do on your car insurance. If you don't ever file a claim, you're upside down. There's a bunch of money going out, no money, nothing coming in the form of claims. So, but I get it. I understand how that would bother you if you feel like, man, I've paid a lot in and I'll never get the money out I paid in. That's true. But there are other, just like from an insurance perspective, you got some people that get a whole lot more out. Let's say you total your car. You paid in $2-3 grand. Over 10 years, you total your car, it's worth $50. You're to the good in that respect. But your next door neighbor paid in the same amount and never had an accident, never filed a claim. That's just the way that works. So you could certainly do without it. In the case of Social Security, you can't. We all have to contribute into that. Now, when it comes to Medicare, there actually is a welfare component of that. And here's what I mean by that. The data now shows that for every dollar paid into Medicare, those who receive payments out in the form of claims, $4. You pay one in, you get $4 out. So from a and guess how we handle that? We go borrow money at the federal government. That's crazy. It's circular nonsense to pay providers to take care of old people under Medicare. That's how the program works. Fox News, SuperTalk News, and Gordon Fellows with the Bankers Association.
Of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
And now, another hour of the talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Begin your transition now.
Now on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It is hour 2 of Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. Thanks for joining us. It's our pleasure now to welcome Gordon Fellows. He's the president of the Mississippi Bankers Association. Hey, Gordon, good to see you again.
Hey, good morning, Gerard. Thanks for having me on.
Well, it's been a few weeks since you and I talked, but, man, it just seems like a lot of stuff happens in your industry these days. It used to be kind of boring. You know, that's the way you liked it, like uneventful, boring. Let's just keep on plugging away at business. We're taking in deposits and making loans and supporting economic activity. But it seems like you're in the crosshairs. Your industry is. And then you've got, of course, lots of consolidation going on. Let's talk about that first, including right here in the state of Mississippi. You got Cadence. Is now part of Huntington Bank. Tell us about that transaction. What happened there, Gordon?
Yeah, so that's a great leading question. So Cadence was the largest bank in Mississippi and headquartered in Mississippi, and they branched kind of all across the southeast from Texas to Florida. And Huntington is one of the largest banks in the upper Midwest, sort of the old Rust Belt states, right? They're based in Ohio. And if you kind of look at the map, you know, they kind of have everything north of Kentucky, from the river, Mississippi River to east to the coast. They don't have anything south, in their footprint. And so, you know, geographically, I think that merger made a lot of sense. You know, I hate losing a local headquarters, but Huntington is for our association already proven to be a good member. We talk very frequently, and they're, I think, trying to remind the state that they want to be involved and engaged as a corporate citizen here. What's interesting about that is that acquisition made Huntington the 10th largest bank in the country, and so they continue to be the bank with the most branches in Mississippi, and they have an awful lot of scale now. So they're a top 10 institution, and that will certainly change probably change some of the technology that comes to market and stuff like that here. Of course, there's also customer relationships and staff relationships and all that stuff that sort of have to be managed as part of those transitions. And so that's been a big change and something that I certainly think everybody in the industry is aware of, and probably most Mississippians are aware of, too.
So for the audience, folks, banks, size of banks measured in terms of assets on the balance sheet, how big is Huntington, Gordon?
Yeah, I don't know their total number. It would be way north of $100 billion.
Sure.
And if you think about where Cadence was around $50 billion. Yeah. And so it's a substantial climb. I probably should know their number. I don't know what it is. It's the biggest number we have. You know, Regions is a comparison is around 130, I think. Yeah. So, and this would be a lot larger than that.
And as I recall, the Regions transaction that ultimately resulted in the acquisition of Deposit Guarantee, that's back in the 90s. Hard to believe it's been that long.
Right.
Who was the largest bank in terms of assets, as I recall, in the state at that time? They were sitting at about $30 billion, right? So now with Regions at $130 billion through all the other acquisitions, it's just growth, of course, as well. But you know, these guys want to be a good corporate citizen in the state. Banks, you know it better than anybody. It's the feel good message. I mean it's not so much that they offer anything because they're very restricted. That's that different just from a financial services perspective. I understand there are nuances there, but in general, it's relationships. That's what makes banks,
right?
And that's that draws customers and retains customers. You get accustomed, you get comfortable with whom you're working with, whether you're just a typical consumer customer or certainly even more importantly a business customer. And now these guys all have wealth management departments as well, and that's a huge part of their relationship building.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. So I'm in Oxford right now. We're hosting our annual School of Banking, which is for, you know, professional education. So the classes, we have around 140 bankers here that are, you know, 5 to 10 years into their career, and they're kind of learning basics. And so yesterday, to your point, the first year class spent 4 hours on accounting, right? You got to understand numbers to be a banker, but they also spent 3 hours on relationship building and how to be a consultant to your customer, right? And so you got to be technical when you're a banker, but you also have to have the people skills and the relationship skills that are important. And to your point about consolidation too, and I don't know if you want to get into this or not, but one of the things that's happened since we talked is the new housing law has gone into effect. And there were some provisions in that we thought were really important, that Cindy Hyde-Smith helped champion. She was one of the authors of that would incentivize new bank formation by delaying the time that capital has to be phased in. So to start a bank, you got to have capital, like startup capital, and instead of having all that in the first year, this new law would allow that to be stretched out over 8 quarters. So you can slowly phase it in, which makes the structure of a new bank a little easier to swallow. That is interesting. We haven't had a new bank formed in Mississippi since 2007. There's been a lot of consolidation in the industry really since Dodd-Frank passed, but there has not been a lot of new bank formation anywhere in the country. And so I think it's a positive thing for consumers. It's a positive thing for businesses when new banks form, and for Congress to sort of say, as part of a housing bill to help the housing supply, we need more new community banks entering the market. Let's try to help figure out policy solutions to get more banks in place, I think is good for everybody. So that, I don't know if you want to get into the housing bill, but that's a piece of it that was something that I think is worth talking about.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm glad you brought that up. I wasn't aware that was incorporated in it, but it certainly makes sense. The idea being, let's make it easier to stand up a bank, and thus we have more lenders in the industry, and that makes more credit available, makes it more competitive, of course. So here's a question for you, Gordon. Does this change FDIC regulations in that, you know, I don't have all this capital up front, but I'm going to get there, and I've got some time to accumulate that? How's that work?
Yeah. So it sets a new timeline for capital deployment for new bank formations that the FDIC will have to govern. It also requires the FDIC and the Fed and the OCC, all the bank regulatory agencies to do a study and report back to Congress on what some of the other impediments to new bank formations are out there, and make some recommendations on regulatory things that could happen to also help incentivize new banks. Okay.
Share your perspective on the housing bill. We got a couple of minutes. We got a break. If you can hang around, we can continue that on the other side. But
sure.
What can I, as a consumer, and I'm interested in buying a house and I need a mortgage, how will this affect me?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I got to be honest. I've studied the bank regulatory side a lot more than the actual sort of mortgage implementation side. I do think I do think it'll open up some pieces of the market a little bit more and sort of create some new opportunities for folks. But we think the community bank regulatory pieces that the House really helped squeeze in are going to be helpful toward getting more community banks back into the mortgage market. You know, a lot of community banks sort of got pushed out of the mortgage market after Dodd-Frank, and so there's some tailored things in the bill that are supposed to incentivize community banks to reassess getting back into that space. So, you know, as a consumer, the more people that are making mortgage loans, the better. And community banks know their communities better than anybody else. And so if community banks are thinking more about how do we do more mortgages, I think that's a really positive thing for everybody.
Well, and they also deal with the builders, right? They typically have relationships with the builders who are local, and they're providing banking, both treasury services and loans to the industry.
Credit, yeah. Construction credit, right? Yeah, that's a big part of what community banks do. And, you know, if you think about community banks are by far the largest lender to small businesses around the country. Most of those builders are small businesses. Yeah. That's a key business line, and new either commercial or residential construction. You know, that's an important piece of the economy moving forward, and local banks want to support the construction end. Local banks are trying to figure out now how does this new law make it better for community banks to engage in mortgage loans too. So hopefully we get the loan on the building side and get the loan on getting the person in the house. The more people that own homes and communities, the better, right? Yeah, totally agree. So we're up against a break. I want you to think about this on the break when we come back. Your thoughts on something that the president's really pushing for, and the Congress is, well, at least Republicans, indexing capital gains to inflation. How might that affect the housing market? And then whether or not you think that some of the prohibitions against institutional buyers really scarfing up these houses, how that might affect the market as well. We got Gordon Fellows, president of the Mississippi Bankers Association. We're coming right back from the Element Wealth Studio.
Mr. Banker, please.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
Now, on to the real part.
Dynamite! On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. We are talking to Gordon Fellows, president of the Mississippi Bankers Association. All right, so on the break, before we went to break, Gordon, first, this is something that's been talked about a long time, which is just indexing capital gains to inflation. And just a quick explanation of what that means. You buy an asset today, and it's at some stated value. That kind of goes on your books. You sell it in the future, and if you sell it for more than you paid for it, you've got what's called a gain, a capital gain, and you got to pay taxes on that gain. But you may not have actually experienced any increase in that asset were it not for inflation. So you're actually paying a tax because of inflation. And so indexing to inflation would simply adjust the purchase price of that asset based on inflation since you bought it. And in the housing market, that's a huge deal because a lot of people have been sitting on these assets for an extended period of time, and they look to sell them. They say, wow, okay, I'd make a great gain, but I'd have to hit the hip and pay taxes out of that gain. But that's mainly because the value of it went up due to inflation. It's thought that if we indexed the purchase price to inflation, thus reducing the gain subject to taxes, that doesn't change the purchase price, the selling price really. It just changes the calculation of the gain for tax purposes, that a lot of people sitting on houses would go out there and sell them, and that would free up some inventory. Your thoughts on that first?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think that was a part of the discussion as to whether or not that ought to have been included in the housing bill, and I think ultimately that was left out. I don't think it was included. Right. You probably know better than me. I'm gonna take this in a bit of a different direction that I think you'll find kind of interesting. So after Congress passed the housing bill last week, the House passed by a pretty strong bipartisan vote the Main Street Capital Access Act, which is a bank regulatory tailoring law, and that has not moved in the Senate yet, so it's not become law. But it's a pretty important bill, sort of, for drivers of economic growth. And one of the pieces of that bill sort of mirrors this conversation. Instead of individual gains being indexed, though, it talks about the regulatory asset thresholds. So you're talking about different banks' asset sizes. All banks are regulated, but a bank that's $900 million has a little bit less complex regulations than a bank that's $1 billion, and a bank that's $3 billion, their regulations are a little more complex than a $1 billion bank. And so, different regulatory thresholds kick in as banks grow. And as we've seen consolidation in the industry, there's been lots of banks that have jumped these thresholds. And so the bill that the House passed last week actually indexes these asset thresholds for several bank regulations to inflation.
Okay.
And so the idea is the same idea that a community bank that is $1.2 billion isn't really all that different than when it was $900 million. And so let's let that regulation float up as inflation occurs and as consolidation occurs, sort of to help address the same point you're getting at the institutional level, not at the individual level, which I think is interesting.
I'm glad you shared that. I mean, that's so essentially we're applying regulatory policy to some extent based on inflation. That's just unprecedented. I can't remember any other policy, right? That's like that. But it makes total sense.
Doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. That's right. So adjusting it makes good sense. Yeah.
Wow. So, well, of course, this indexing capital gains at a minimum to personal residences was hoping to be by the Republicans, some Republicans, part of the housing bill. But just as an aside, I think we ought to do that for all assets. Honestly, I don't think we should have to pay taxes on inflation, which is really what happens without indexing. So you and I have talked a little bit about, is this idea or this I guess phenomena that really cropped up during COVID when you had the entire housing industry was just in chaos, honestly, where institutional investors, private equity firms, and that had practices in residential real estate were going out and scarfing up homes, often for rent. They were looking for income, not just to buy a house and sit on it and hope to sell it in the future and make a profit on it. And a lot of folks felt like, well, that was crowding out the typical traditional home buyer and causing the price of houses to go up. This would free up some inventory. Does your industry see it that way?
So that's a good question. You know, generally, right, the banking industry is kind of a free market industry, and we sort of say the government probably ought not get involved in market-based decisions. Let the market decide, right? That's generally where most bankers fall. On this specific policy question in this specific legislation, we didn't take a position on one side or the other because we could see both sides of it, I think. So, you know, the industry really, as the housing bill progressed, we were really talking more about what can we do and what can Congress do to encourage banks to make more loans to people, and kind of stayed away from the argument about who the purchasers are. Is it private equity? Is it a corporation? Is it individuals? Right. We really focused on how does bank regulation sometimes how can that decline the number of loans that get made, and how can we get that number up instead of lower?
What have you heard from your members, Gordon, in Mississippi? Have they reported that they've seen these big investors, institutional investors? Have they seen them active in our state?
That hasn't really come up in many of the conversations I've had. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's probably very possible, but I've not had a lot of people say this is a real problem in my community either. So I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah. All right. So I run into you at the Capitol sometimes during the legislative session. We're only a few months removed from that cranking up again. What's on your agenda for the banking industry this year?
Yeah, so there are several things, you know, and it'll be an election year in January. So, you know, usually that means a little a little shorter time in Jackson. They try to get out earlier and get back to campaign, and I think that's good and important. We're beginning that process now, sort of trying to identify, are there technical things that we need to get corrected? The Genius Act has passed, and that's been in law for about a year now. There are some things that states may have to do to follow up on Genius, and we're talking about that. There are several pieces from last year's session that could come back up that we're trying to assess and see what we think about. There's the PBM issue has gotten a lot of conversation. We've been watching that issue. There were several bank sort of operational things last year that we were part of that ended up dying late in the session that we might talk about again, like safe deposit box escheatment, which is maybe the most boring thing I could talk about. Really bad radio, right? But so some of those kind of things could come back up. There's still a lot happening in Congress too, so we're spending a lot of time on that. The Clarity Act, the stable coin market structure bill is before the Senate right now. We think there are some really important changes that need to be made to that. You and I have talked before about how bank deposits are the fuel of loans, right? And so the more deposits a bank has, the more loans it can make in that community. We have a unique system in America where there are lots of banks, thousands of banks, not just 10 or 20 banks, and local decisions have always been made about spending local money, right? So local deposits get put at a community bank. The local bank determines credit availability in that market and uses those deposits to fund loans. We're very concerned that some of the language in the Clarity Act could lead to deposits leaving community banks and going into Silicon Valley. If you think about sort of these big tech companies, if there's a local community bank in Baldwin or Mendenhall or Byhalia making loans in those towns, and those towns each see significant deposit runoff, it's very unlikely that a fintech company that is a stablecoin related company is going to come into those little communities and make small business loans. And so we're really keyed in on that issue because those deposits staying local and funneling through the economy, through the banking system has always been, really since pre-Civil War days, how the local economy has been funded. And so that's an important, as technology changes, we want to embrace the change and provide customers the benefits of that, but we also don't want to see a systemic change that erodes local lending power. And so that's a really important thing right now. It's really pretty front and center. Unsure if the Senate's going to vote on that this week. I'm sure you've seen the president sort of say they ought to stay in for the recess, skip the recess. So, but that's an important piece of what could come out of the crypto sector that we're watching.
Yeah. We got about 30 seconds. I just want to get this in there. Nationally, the industry seems to be doing well, just based on earnings reports. How about here in Mississippi? Your members doing well?
Yeah, I think so. Everybody I talk to says things are really positive, that the economy is moving in the right direction. It's positive. Good
to hear, because you're so right. Without those institutions, especially in a rural state like this, our economy just doesn't go. Appreciate it, Gordon. Appreciate you joining us. Yep. Gordon Fellows, president.
Good to talk to you.
Yeah, man. Gordon Fellows, president of the Mississippi Bankers Association, has been our guest. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Listen and bring it on. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
It is on
SuperTalk, Mississippi.
On the C Spire text line, welcome back, everyone. We're in the Element Wealth studio. The C Spire text line, by the way, 601-879-4395. Says, this is Mike, I'm as conservative as anybody, but it really bothers me, people that say no tax on Social Security. That is not true. we talked about that a lot, Rhino, on the program. The same is true with respect to tips and overtime. And with respect to Social Security, that's absolutely true. The law did not render Social Security benefits completely exempt from federal income tax. What the law did was increase the standard deduction for seniors, which did in fact mean that many seniors who do receive Social Security benefits were pushed out of the threshold for Social Security benefits being taxable. So it had the effect for a good number of people. What I recall before the law was passed, been a while since I researched this, about 40% of Social Security recipients paid taxes on their benefits. 60% did not before this provision was implemented in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. What it did is it bumped that number from 60% not paying to 80% not paying. So half of those who were paying were taken off the tax rolls from a federal taxability of their Social Security benefits, which are taxed on a different methodology than your standard wage income. I want to say the first $25,000 for an individual and $32,000 for a couple filing joint of income is Social Security income. It was exempt from federal income tax, not subject to federal income tax, I should say, before the law went into effect. So by increasing the standard deduction, which reduces your benefits for purposes of calculating your benefit income, Social Security tax, by another $6,000, a lot of people had taxable income that was below that $25,000, $32,000. So that's what happened. But the same thing with respect to tips and overtime really doesn't exempt tips and overtime from federal income tax. It just allows your tips and overtime to be deducted from your income. Why does that make a difference? Because during the year when you're receiving tip and overtime income, the tax tables don't account for that income as possibly not being subject to income tax because there are some limits on that, upper AGI limits. I want to say it's $150,000 for a couple, and half of that. It's been a while since I looked at all that, but you have a situation where if you make more than a certain amount, your tips and overtime are taxable. If you make less than a certain amount, they're not. And so it's a deduction. It's not 100% exemption. But that's the way it's typically referred to and described by even our politicians. Yeah, no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime. That's actually not true. That's stretching it a bit. But for the most part, that is true for a lot of people. But again, it's not 100% across the board. So I wouldn't be bothered by it. Just kind of understand the rules, and hopefully if you're on Social Security, Mike, that you're benefiting from the increased standard deduction. I do not, because I make too much money. I just don't mind telling you. So I didn't benefit. I'm still paying taxes on my Social Security. Jerry in Pontotoc says it's 96 degrees in Pontotoc County already. Man, I know. Be careful out there, folks. Ricky in Aberdeen says Social Security will always be there. Mo says, I wonder how much USAID was giving the DNC each year. We're talking about how they are really struggling, is the Democrat National Committee, with fundraising. Really struggling. Have $2 million of debt. Incredible. Jack in Jacktown, let's see, data centers. Perhaps pushback at state, local, and national level is less a problem with data centers. Instead, reflects citizens' refusal to accept that politicians at each of these levels are able to understand potential issues with data centers and mitigate them within the deals inked with AWS example. Not completely sure I know what you're saying there, Jack. Citizens' refusal to accept. If what you're saying is that those folks involved in negotiating these deals don't understand all the ramifications, all the aspects of the technology, the construction, all the elements and components, sure, I get that, but subject matter experts do that can enlighten them and inform and educate, and then that can all be incorporated in the various agreements and applications for permits as well from DEQ, from an environmental perspective. And then, of course, the financial aspect of it, that requires some modeling, some financial analysis. But we have people certainly in the state and across the country that understand how to do that. And hopefully we have elected leaders that can consume and comprehend what's being presented to them so they can make sound decisions with respect to that. Let's see what else. Got $1,000 more on taxes in February due to no tax on overtime. Yeah, that's what we were talking about earlier, because that was not factored into the withholding tables for 2025, even though it went into effect. And did that provision, all those provisions, went into effect January 1, 2025. So they applied to the entire year. So when you did your taxes for 25 and 26, that's right, that would be reflected and included in your tax computations and likely did result for those earning tips and overtime that qualified for the tips and overtime deduction, in a refund. You paid on that income during the year through your employer, but when you filed your tax return, you squared that up. It didn't owe that money. You sent that money to the IRS, and now they owe you. Yeah, that's why we had record refunds. It's a record refund year in the United States. Absolutely. Let's see. I think about $170 billion, says John in Tupelo, owned by BlackRock, controlling interest. Are you talking about Huntington Bank there, John? Are you referring to their size in terms of assets? I didn't think BlackRock owned a controlling interest. They are a public company. Are you saying that you think and I'm not disputing it, BlackRock has more than 50% of the outstanding stock? That's interesting if they do. Ricky in Aberdeen says Trump needs to take out all the drones and missile sites. They're still shooting back at us. Yeah, I'm not really sure why we can't seem to completely eliminate the drone threat and all the other capabilities that they seem to have to wreak havoc in the strait and attack commercial vessels and so forth. I agree, Ricky. I wish we'd do something to completely eliminate that. And then he says Social Security will always be there. I tend to agree. I don't think, even though it's scheduled to become insolvent in 2032, I don't expect that the Congress is going to allow there to be any interruption in payment of full benefits on the books today or on the books then, as the case may be. I agree. They're going to come up with something, and likely it just means we're going to go borrow a bunch of money. That's what's going to happen. I don't see much other than that is kind of where we're headed. We'll certainly see. Let's see. Did the OBBBA increase the debt and deficit? At what point does that become a priority for Republicans, says Thomas in Greenwood? I submit it did not, Thomas. And that's due to the Laffer curve, even after the 2017 Trump tax cuts, despite the fact that Democrats described and framed it as generating the deficits that ensued and being exclusively the driver of that. That's just categorically false, and here's why. Revenues went up a third, but spending went up 50%. That's what drove the increase in deficits. We actually increased revenue after the 2017 tax cuts, and we're producing record revenues now, just not enough to keep up with the increase in spending, mainly driven by Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and a number of the other programs that are in place. And then now, of course, a significant increase in the Department of War's budget. Coming right back in the Element Well studio.
Up a Mississippi.
You know what that means.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
We'll do it live
on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Just kind of wanted to close the loop on the tip overtime and increased standard deduction for seniors. Yeah, the deduction for overtime and tips phases out for individuals with a modified adjusted gross income over $150,000 or $300,000 for joint filers. So in other words, you get to deduct up to $25,000 of tip income if your income as an individual, your top level gross income is less than $150,000, $300,000 for joint filers. And with respect to overtime, same thing, same thresholds, $150,000. And the other thing to keep in mind with respect to overtime that I know is confusing is that only the premium portion of your overtime is deductible, not the entire amount of the pay. And then with respect to Social Security taxes, yeah, I had it right. I was off a little bit. Under $25,000, none of your benefits are taxed. 25 to 34, 50%. Over 34, 85%. That's for an individual. And then the figures go to 32 and 44 for married filing joint. And there's a little formula you use to determine where your income falls into that scale. It's take all your income from everything else and 50% of your Social Security income, boom, add that up. If that comes in at, like I said, less than $25,000, none of your benefits are taxable. The average Social Security benefit, last I checked, Rhino, in the country is under $3,000, about $2,600 or so. And so a lot of people, that are Social Security recipients, beneficiaries, that's their only source of income. So they don't pay any taxes on their Social Security. They didn't before the bill passed. The increase in the standard deduction, it just ensnared and provided that same benefit to some who had either Social Security income or just combined income above those thresholds. And so by increasing the standard deduction, which is used to reduce all that income to see where you fall on that scale, a lot of people just ended up falling off the tax rolls, which I would say is a good thing. Mo says Iran has been stockpiling rockets and drones for years, if not decades. They are hidden in caves all over the country. They roll them out and fire. When we detect the launch, we can destroy where it came from. I'm afraid it would take boots on the ground to end it for good. I've said that for a while as well, Mose, and I guess it just depends on how you define mission being accomplished. I feel like that's when they turn over their nuclear material and they really have no more ability to pursue their nuclear ambitions. I do feel like that's going to require boots on the ground. That is highly unpopular in this country. It's hard to believe we could execute such a mission without any casualties. You typically expect to have some, although our military is better at prosecuting those campaigns certainly than any other on the planet. And with all of the systems and technology and training and just the fine people that wear this nation's uniform, I think that would be minimized, but even one would be too many, obviously. I sort of felt like last week the president was signaling that was imminent, but then he backed off. He said that Iran wants to make a deal, and he's giving diplomatic negotiations sometime. We'll certainly see. You know, there's some crazy stuff still happening in the world of woke. You saw that Mayor Mondami of New York City announced that the city will be opening 5 city-run, tax-funded grocery stores. They're going to sell at prices that are 30% below retail price. Well, Rhino, that means they're losing money. So the taxpayers are literally going to lose money to operate these government-controlled grocery stores. Well, what do you mean lose money, Gerard? Because the net profit in the grocery business is about 2%. So if you're going to sell 30% below traditional retail, you're losing money. And honestly, they're probably losing money if they sold at the standard market retail price because government's just bad at operating anything for that matter. And the private sector, the big grocers in our country, they're pretty dang good at figuring out how to squeeze out a minimum amount of profit. They've achieved vast efficiencies through the decades of learning what the optimum operating model is. You think government's figured that out? Hell no. The other crazy thing I had to pass on, J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, he's a wacko. So he just signed off on legislation in Illinois. This is mind-blowing to me. Allows minors to get birth control medications, implants, IUDs without parental consent. Minors? It just blew me away. They can get prescriptions from doctors, fill it at a pharmacy, pick it up without approval of a legal guardian or parent. Coming right back after Fox News and SuperTalk News.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
That's what I like to listen to.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Winter is here again, oh Lord. Haven't been home in a year, oh Lord. I hope she holds on a little longer.
Welcome back, everyone. It is hour 3, the afternoon portion of Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. We're pleased to welcome now Richard Roberson, President and CEO of the Mississippi Hospital Association, and Dr. Kim Hoover, President and CEO of the Mississippi Hospital Association's Education Foundation. So, Richard, Dr. Hoover, thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having us.
So, start with you, Dr. Hoover. We wanted you guys to come in and talk to us about this nursing student program. You've got the Mississippi Summer Student Nurse Externship Program, I believe is how it is defined. Tell us about that.
So this is a program that the Hospital Association's Foundation has administered for years, actually decades, where our nursing students, after they have 1 year of nursing school, and they've got some skills, and they have an opportunity then to go into the hospital and work with a preceptor. They work the same shift that preceptor works, and they're still in a course, a nursing course, but it gives them an opportunity really to take some of that theoretical knowledge and to put it into practice, to be able to do some clinical reasoning, kind of work on their soft skills like communication, time management, and really to get an opportunity to be much more comfortable in that setting. And then when they go back, as they finish that course, it's 320 hours that they spend at those hospitals. They go back into another year of nursing school, but they've had an opportunity to really become comfortable with the setting, develop relationships, and really feel better about what they're doing, and they do better in not only in their classrooms, they certainly pass their NCLEX, but then often want to go back to the hospital in which they did that externship to work when they get out of school.
So 592 students is what the press release says.
Exactly. That's the most that we've had to go through this externship program. We've been edging up really since COVID. We've had 300 and 400 going through, but last year we had a really big increase, and I anticipate we may have 650 next year.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
a lot.
So are we going to keep them here?
Well, I hope we can keep them here. We certainly, one of the things that this does, when it allows a student to become comfortable in that setting, then they feel better when they get out of school about where they're going to work, and they have less anxiety, and they feel, I think they get more satisfaction out of what they're doing initially. You know, we want them to stay in the state of Mississippi, but we also want them to stay in hospitals. We really, often our nurses with 18 months of experience or less tend to turn over in a hospital, whether they're seeking a different shift or just a different job. So if we can keep them for a couple of years in the hospital where they can really go from like novice to expert and become more comfortable with that job, they're much more likely to stay in there, and that extern program's the first step for that.
Well, that makes total sense. So Richard, what's the staffing look like in hospitals? I hear this all the time. Well, we got beds, we got building, we got halls, and we got equipment, but we ain't got no people. And so there's like this distinction between beds and staffed beds is the term I hear.
100%. So, when you look at a hospital's number of beds, and if you go to the health department's website and it's got the licensed bed count for each hospital in the state, that's a little misleading because typically not every one of those beds is staffed. The staffing is short. Although, just as Dr. Hoover was saying, we're seeing increases in stuff like the nurse externship program, and we're hopeful that the numbers are going up. What happened before and during the pandemic was a lot of exodus from healthcare. A lot of nurses that were at retirement age retired. Some folks just changed careers and left hospitals, and so those staff beds is really all that matters.
Yeah.
And we're still seeing shortages from a nursing standpoint there, but not just in nursing. I mean, it's other jobs within the hospital. So you think about lab techs, you think about radiology technicians, all those folks that really are still involved in providing direct patient care. Oftentimes, we've got shortages in those areas too. So, anyone that, is listening or has a friend or a family member that's listening that has an interest in helping other people and wants to do things that benefit other folks and provide that level of public service, healthcare is a great space to be in. And we've definitely got a need, and they're good paying jobs out there. So
with respect to the definition, and I never really heard this until the pandemic, the distinction between we got beds and then we got staff beds, right? I never really heard of that until the pandemic when it became an issue, more than it was certainly prior.
Yeah.
Are these policies that are implemented, established by the hospitals themselves, or are these some sort of government restrictions and policies?
Yeah, a lot of it just is just your workforce.
Okay.
In
just
some
how they
ways,
manage the hospital.
In some ways it may be similar to, and this is very simplified, but you may go to a big restaurant and you may see a bunch of tables sitting in the back that you think, well, why can't I just be seated there? Well, it may be because they don't have enough wait staff that night. And so, in our case, there may be beds available in the hospital, but there's no one to man that bed safely. And, and hospitals try to keep the appropriate ratios of caregivers to patients so that it's a safe environment. The last thing you want is to put a patient in a bed with very little staffing. If it's understaffed, that's not good for anybody. So those staffing ratios are really important. They're not, they're not hard, fast.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was some sort of government standards or requirements.
It's really, and it differs at each hospital based on the acuity level of the patient. And it could be that you've got enough nurses maybe to staff the cardio floor, but not the neuro floor. And so, as medicine has become more specialized, sometimes that is an issue as well.
So, Dr. Hoover, where exactly does this occur, this externship program? This is training, education. Is this in the hospitals, in classrooms, combination?
It's in the hospitals, only in the hospitals. In fact, hospitals all over the state of Mississippi. And so hospitals actually hire this student nurse as an extern. So they're being paid while they're getting clinical hours, the credit for that. They're taking a course, but they're actually being paid during that time. And so some hospitals have the money to pay more externs, and then some hospitals don't. You know, we do a survey every year for the nursing workforce in our hospitals, and our rural hospitals tell us that they would like to have externs, but there's some that just can't afford that. And so we, at one time, we had funding from the planning and development districts to fund. In 2023, we're up to 200 extern positions across the state. That decreased to 0 this year. So we have no more funding for them, and that impacts whether the rural hospitals can recruit and retain nursing students.
So the press release indicates that the Mississippi Hospital Association Mississippi Center for Quality and Workforce, the acronym MCQW, right? So, yeah, it's a mouthful. So they are involved in coordinating, is what the press release says, and supporting this program. And so institutions like apply to participate? Is the way this works?
So MCQW is actually within the foundation. And so it's they're part of the foundation, so they're part of that already. But the hospitals and the schools of nursing do. We've got a set of guidelines that is developed by academic partners and by nurse executives in the hospital. And so they all agree to adhere to those guidelines. The students can only do certain things. The preceptors have to be qualified, and they have to ensure that they get their clinical hours all in before they can get credit for it.
So are these students in nursing programs in higher ed at that point? Okay.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that...
They've had 1 year of nursing school at that point.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So, Richard, another issue, of course, is this externship program. I think is great for attracting new talent and then getting them in the workforce eventually and maybe hitting the ground running, I think would be a major objective of that, right? Getting them some exposure to what their life's going to be back in that career, What about retention? I mean, it's this highly competitive industry, and you know folks from all over the country, especially during the pandemic. I kept hearing from all my hospital friends about folks poaching them.
Travel nursing became a big deal, and it still is to some extent. It's not what it was back in 20 and 2021, but you know the retention aspect is still a big challenge. And you know, and as Dr. Hoover was saying, working in the hospital it's hard. It's really hard. Any healthcare is hard, but those hospital settings are challenging, and you know you want to make sure you keep people, that you don't burn folks out, and that you've got the funding to pay them for the hard work that they're doing.
We got a break. You guys hang around.
Absolutely.
We keep talking.
Sure.
All right. We got Richard Roberson with the Mississippi Hospital Association, as well as Dr. Kim Hoover, coming right back.
Hey y'all, this is Parker Evans with First South Farm Credit in Oxford. Here at First South, we specialize in financing rural real estate. Whether it's a 1,000-acre hunting camp in the Delta or your own small piece of paradise anywhere in North Mississippi, we can make a customized loan package for you. First South offers long-term financing with competitive interest rates to fit your needs. So whatever your land financing needs may be, call me, Parker Evans, at First South Farm Credit, 662-234-5015, or find us online at firstsouthland.com.
Hello, I'm Gary Jolly from the Tractor Store. LS Tractor understands your passion for the land, and just like you, LS Tractor is committed to excellence and superior products. LS Tractor comes with a long list of standard features that are unmatched by other brands and backed with the LS commitment to provide exceptional customer service and satisfaction. You get a lot more for your money with the LS Tractor. Come to the Tractor Store in Richland to experience the LS difference. The Tractor Store in Richland.
At Key Constructors, our mission is to build a legacy that will stand the test of time through hard work, dedication, and pursuing excellence. Key Constructors is a heavy civil construction company, a leader in the bridge construction world. Our goal is to provide a positive work environment for you to grow personally and in your career. We are proud of who we are and what we do, making it happen one bridge at a time. Come join our team of Black Label Bridge Builders. Check out Key Constructors on Facebook and other social media platforms and keyconstructors.com.
Tree cutters, fly-by-night crews. They're popping up everywhere, and they're risky. Don't gamble with your home. Baroni's Tree Pros is local, insured, and trusted for safe professional work. Before you hire anyone, check their insurance, because if the wrong crew drops a tree on your house, they'll disappear fast, and you'll be stuck with the damage. When you need a job done safely and done right, call Baroni's Tree Pros. Jan the Man is standing by to ready to provide those estimates. Call 601-345-8090 or visit baronistreepros.com.
We've sent that Rip Van Winkle guy to the dentist.
Hey, what? Hey, what?
And what's worse than a trip to the dentist? Your wife's paint project that you've put off. Let Seabrook Paint in Jackson and Ridgeland find that Benjamin Moore Paint and a contractor that will get you back doing the important things in life, like grilling and watching sports. Seabrook, Benjamin Moore Paint, and a happy wife, happy life. Seabrook Paint in Jackson on Monument and in Ridgeland on West Jackson.
First down. Filibuster. Just everything you need to know to start your day smarter. Mornings with Richard Cross on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Check it out. Let's do this. The talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Let's get on with it.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Well Studio. We're visiting with Richard Roberson, President and CEO of the Mississippi Hospital Association, and Dr. Kim Hoover, President and CEO of the Mississippi Hospital Association's Education Foundation. So I'm assuming then, Dr. Hoover, that the members of MHA, they fund this program, right? Are they contributing or as part of their dues to MHA? It goes to the foundation for this purpose? Or?
No, this is available to any hospital in the state,
Okay.
member or non-member.
Okay.
And the only thing that they pay for this program is actually when they pay that student to come in and work at the hospital.
Okay.
So we have a committee that gets together a couple of times a year to make sure we've got policies and procedures and guidelines that are current and evidence-based. And basically, this program is free to them other than them paying the student.
Okay. I got you. Well, I'm sure you're seeing similar programs around the country. I mean, everybody, the industry is struggling with a shortage, an acute shortage of nurses.
You know, we see pockets of externships, not a statewide. We still do not have a statewide externship program like in Mississippi.
Okay.
That's been here for 40 years.
Yeah.
We haven't seen that replicated across the United States, just small pockets within states.
Okay. Well, it doesn't seem like it's a problem that's going away, but I guess I would ask you to those maybe out there listening or family members of people that might be good prospects to become a part of the nursing profession, what would you tell them? Why should they do it?
I would tell them that it's one of the most satisfying roles I think that you can have is to help people when they are not at their best. And honestly, the career has so many options, even within the hospital, which is where I started, and how I moved up through the ranks, so to speak, that it is a career that is mobile in so many ways. Upward mobility, hopefully not out of the state, but certainly if there's a need, it's just an incredible career that I would recommend for anyone.
Yeah, I think you have to be wired a certain way. you're dealing with the difficult situations often, but
you are.
It's got to be rewarding when you have these victories and you're part of a team that's healing a person.
Even when you certainly you're healing people, but there are instances when you've done all that you can, you've kept them comfortable, and you've taken care of the family. And even when it's palliative care, you're still providing something that they can't get anywhere else. And it's still rewarding. It's hard, but it's rewarding.
Yeah. Well, and there are a lot of great young people across our state that our high schools are turning out, and certainly we have great nursing programs across our institutions. And there's no reason why we can't address this shortage.
I agree.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree.
What do your members think about this, Richard? Do they say that this is valuable to them?
Yeah, it's been a successful program, and as Dr. Hoover was saying, I mean, it is nursing is just a skill set that lends itself to so many other opportunities as well. And in fact, we've got so many now. So many of our hospital administrators, our CEOs at the hospital, that have come from a nursing background.
Yeah.
And that's a very different perspective when you bring that clinical side over to the business side, so to speak.
Yeah.
And you're able to marry both of those interests, because it does take both. I mean, hospitals obviously provide clinical services. That's what they're there for. But you also have to be mindful of running it like a business and trying to make all those numbers work. And they're incredible assets to the industry. In fact, our chair-elect for MHA is a nurse by training, and she's the CEO at the hospital up in Water Valley. And we've got some amazing leaders that have gone through the nursing ranks. And as Dr. Hoover was saying, it's just an amazing skill set. I hear all the time when you ask young people, well, what do you want to do, and why do you want to pick that career? Most often what I hear them say is, well, I just want to do something that helps other people.
Sure.
This is a wonderful service to others, and you can make a good living doing it. It's hard work, but it's incredibly rewarding and very much needed.
Well, there's one company that I'm fairly familiar with. I'm sure you guys are too. It's called Amedisys, and they are more into, I think, hospice care and home health care. I think is the way they kind of describe themselves. Founded in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It's a public company today, and the CEO and founders was a nurse.
Yeah,
it's a public company.
Yeah,
they're doing quite well, by the way. So
you've got folks that start off from a clinical background, whether it's nursing or obviously a lot of physicians and other clinical aspects of healthcare that move through the clinical ranks. They move over into the administrative side. They're working for insurance companies. They're working for hospitals. They're doing a lot of different things. And you get that clinical approach. You understand firsthand what it's like to take care of the patient, which at the end of the day, that's what healthcare ought to really be about. And I say it all the time. If we get that patient experience right, everything else is going to work itself out. The revenue, the numbers, so to speak. But you've got to get that patient experience right. That's what we're all in this for. And nurses are certainly at the front line.
Dr. Hoover, do those who have been through the externship program and then become full-blown employed nurses in the hospital environment, do they come back and talk about how valuable that was?
We actually survey all of these externs that go through after they get out of this. They are overwhelmingly positive about that experience. And, in fact, when they go back, they have a bit of advantage over those who've really not been able to do that. And then when they get into those, many go back to the hospital they did their internship in, or externship in. And so they do talk about how much more comfortable it is. The hospital nurses know them. They know the units they would like to go to most of the time and know more about that work. They can make a better choice about going to a med-surg unit or labor and delivery or something like that. And so there's never been a negative comment about that when they get out. It's always it was better for them.
Well, certainly the testimonies are good for those that are thinking about it, right, on the fence, to talk to somebody who's been through it and had a very positive experience. Sounds like you've got a long list of those, I'm sure. So, Richard, before you go, Give us an update from the MHA, and in particular, something that happened recently, and that's with UMC and Greenwood LaFleur Hospital. What's happening there?
Yeah, so Greenwood has kind of had some challenges over the last few years. The most recent year has been pretty tough. They, because of a result of some of the methodologies in the Medicaid supplemental payment program, Medicaid was recouping funds from them, primarily related to labor and delivery services going away and other services going away. There's a lag payment in how Medicaid makes those payments. They're paying off prior year claims history, and then when they true it up in the more current year, there are gaps there sometimes. And sometimes hospitals are overpaid and sometimes they're underpaid. And so Medicaid had accelerated a repayment on them for whatever reason, and that was throwing them into a pinch where they were having to make plans to close all the way back in the fall of last year.
Right.
It's walked it right up to the edge now, and it looks like now they did go file bankruptcy to clear the pathway of any other creditors and clear their debts and all that stuff and get a way to take care of that. And now the county has authorized the transfer to UMC.
Okay.
And so, the important thing in all of that is that folks in LaFleur County will continue to have a hospital, continue to have health care services available in Greenwood, and that is a good thing for that community.
Yeah. It's hard for these counties to operate these hospitals. There was a time in this country, as you know, where every county had one. And that's changed considerably. I think we may be the state that has the most, honestly, county-operated hospitals.
Yeah, we've got a lot of community-owned hospitals still, and some of them have, over the years assigned, basically leased the hospital out to another hospital to run, to manage the hospital, so to speak. And you see that across the state with different hospitals and that are still community-owned, but maybe managed by a private or nonprofit entity. And the most important thing is we got to make sure that there are local resources available for all of our communities across the state to have good health care options and particularly good hospital options.
Got it. Appreciate it. Appreciate you guys coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Always.
Thanks for having us.
We've been talking to Richard Roberson, President and CEO of the Mississippi Hospital Association, and also Dr. Kim Hoover, President and CEO of the Mississippi Hospital Association's Education Foundation. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth Studio.
Listen middays with Gerard Gibert.
Welcome to our show
on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Okay, now you have a good one. Well. Let's go.
Welcome back, everyone. It's middays from the Element Wealth Studio. We appreciate Richard and Dr. Hoover for coming in from the Mississippi Hospital Association. So we had somebody that wanted to calculate the ROI they could get. Rhino, did you look that one up? If I put $50,000 in a CD for 4% for 5 months. So I'm not sure if they're saying total of $50,000 over a 5-month period, or $50,000 a month for 5 months. So help us understand, because it could be either. If you put in $250,000 versus $50,000, but depositing into the CD over 5 months, and then you need to know, believe it or not, how much you're putting in each increment. But if you just spread that out into 5 equal installment investments. Just
doing the napkin math real quick in my head. You're looking at less than $1,000 for every $50,000 over 5 months. Like the more, if you did $50,000 a month for 5 months, it could get up over $1,000 over the course of 5 months. But like if you just deposited $50,000 in a CD at 4%, after 5 months, you're looking at $850 or less.
Yeah, but once you've hit the total amount of investment on the CD, the 4% that's paid is per year. So you'd have to calculate. I mean, because the question was draw per year. That was the question. So assuming that you got a total $50,000 CD, it's just sitting at the bank, and you get 4% on it, and that it depends on if it's structured as a compound interest deal or if it's just a straight level interest payment. So, and there are different instruments for that, but $50,000.
Yeah, tell me if I got this wrong. So 50,000% principal, 4% annual rate, that's $2,000 a year.
Yep.
2,000 divided by 12 months is 166 and change. And 5 months multiplied, it's less than $850. Yeah,
if that's what the question is, that's right. Yeah. So, but nonetheless, 4% actually just for parking your money in a bank ain't that bad, especially considering. And I don't know what current CD rates are. They probably are in that range. Just a standard kind of money market CD account. It depends on the maturity, but that's not bad given that it wasn't too long ago you were lucky if you could get 1%. Now, that's the flip side of higher interest rates. When you got higher borrowing interest rates, you also are going to have commensurately higher interest income rates. And so we are in a period, in an era where, because we have certainly higher than it was a few years ago, benchmark interest rate from the Fed, which drives all the other rates, that we also have higher interest income rates. So you can make a little bit more money with zero risk. Just put your money in a CD or a United States Treasury instrument, bill, bond, or note. Let's see what else we got. Paula Meridian says hospitals need to come up with some type of daycare for nurses and doctors. Nurses go in at 6:45, get off at 7:30. There's not a daycare open when they get off work. I hear you, Paul, and some actually do, as you know, Rhino. Some hospitals and other organizations actually offer those services. As part of employment. That's been, I would say, kind of a recently added benefit in a portfolio, as in the last 20 years, maybe. Certainly recent compared to the more traditional health insurance, 401k plans. That has become a deal. I remember when the technology industry was building out in the PC era, the 80s and the 90s, and you kind of live, work, play, shop, sleep, eat, on the campus there. And daycare was part of the services that they provided, as well as lots of big companies, as you know, actually have clinics on their campuses as well for health care. Have recreational facilities, as an example. So I think we've seen lots of creativity, I think is a way to put it, just to compete for talent in various industries. And no doubt, I would say, Rhino, that daycare services, child care services has become one of those benefits that companies are using to compete with others. It's not as ubiquitous as offering some sort of retirement plans, generally speaking, in the private sector, and 401k plans and health care benefits, and even life insurance benefits, deferred comp plans, stuff like that. But it's more common. But I hear you, Paul. I know that's an issue. It's a problem. Thomas in Greenwood says 4% won't keep up with inflation. Well, it is slightly higher than inflation right now, but it's also zero risk. these investments we're talking about, such as a CD or some sort of government treasury security, depending on the maturity of those. But it's still a pretty good deal, and to some people, inflation is a bigger factor in their household budgets than it is to other people. So it's still overall a pretty good investment vehicle for those that just don't want to lose their principal. That's the main thing. You're going to like the individual that sent us that question. You're going to looking for a place to invest $50,000. You certainly could go invest it in stocks, and that would be the most risky investment that's readily available. You're going to get a higher return if you choose and you trade effectively, but it is higher risk than just putting your money in a zero risk U.S. Treasury security or even a bank certificate of deposit. That's virtually no risk, and certainly if it's less than $250,000, generally speaking, it's insured. Even if the bank were to collapse, they've got insurance on accounts up to $250,000. So it's still overall a pretty big deal, a pretty good deal. The owner of the small grocery store where I live told us that 80% of his profit comes from the deli serving plate lunches and breakfast. Oh, I'm quite sure relative to just selling commodity groceries off the shelf. There's absolutely no doubt. And it's not like that's significantly profitable as well, just selling lunches and breakfast. And honestly, just looking at some of the data I have through the years working with customers and automating back in the old days point of sale systems for restaurants and delis like that, if you didn't drink something, they didn't make much money. The food products generally carry very low margins. The profits made on the coffee, the tea, the milk, the orange juice, the other drinks, soft drinks, and so forth. That's where the profit's made. And most people don't even bellyache about that. You're sort of conditioned to it, accustomed to it. So, Marshall and Terry, yeah, so I did have a friend, by the way, that made a good point that texted me when I was sharing that story about J.B. Pritzker, who allows minors to get birth control, said, think of it this way. There's certainly some benefit to that, and that maybe this will prevent minors from having babies. They're going to be promiscuous no matter what. If they could get access to birth control, maybe this would prevent pregnancies of minors. I get that, but then I worry about the slippery slope of government saying, sorry, parents, you don't have a say here in something like getting prescription drugs. So there's a fine line in there. And those are difficult.
Especially when their next argument will be, we'll see minors are already receiving hormone therapy. Because that's what birth control is.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Hadn't thought about that. You're essentially tricking the body's hormonal system, are you not? This is what you're doing there.
And you're putting a political and societal end around on trans bans.
Yeah, that's totally true. Speaking of which, the craziness with the trans stuff, I don't know if you saw this, but that nutcase, Tim Walz, have you seen this? He is literally, this is Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, ran as the vice presidential candidate with Kamala Harris. He's providing a sign-off on legislation that provides transgender dolls to Minnesota school children as young as 4 years old. Like changeable genitals in the dolls, coming right back.
Before you're
properly set all controls before recording.
All systems go.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Come on, California! And I know
So Senator Rand Paul, no fan of Dr. Anthony Fauci. He's been on him for a while, mainly because he feels like Fauci misled the American people and really didn't handle his job properly, but also blames him for funding the Wuhan research lab, but he's still stuck with the idea that COVID originated in the wet market. I think that's largely been rebuked. And
the wet market just exacerbated it. It didn't originate from it.
Exactly. That's the latest finding. So he's going, as Dr. Fauci, he's going to be on the Hill tomorrow testifying. It turns out he kept a diary, and I'm not sure how Rand Paul, the senator, obtained his diary, but he released it. Many of the entries in the diary. That's ahead of tomorrow's hearing. And what we learned is that this guy is a nutcase that was more concerned about his fame than he was saving lives and protecting the American people from this virus. He was just throwing crap out there, it seemed like, to see what could stick and how much power he could wield over people. That's despicable. But he's going to be on the Hill tomorrow.
It is not hyperbole to say that today I am the most famous and talked about person in the country.
That's from his diary, right? Yeah, that's an entry in his diary.
And the diary came from electronic journal entries that were on federal government servers, discovered by RFK Jr., and turned over to the Senate Homeland Security Committee.
Okay. Well, that's right. So that's understood. In any employment situation, you're using the company's systems. That information is accessible by the company. You don't expect a right to privacy when you're using company systems. You want to keep it private, you get off the company systems and use your own personally owned systems. So, man, it's incredible that what we're learning about this guy, he signed a grant that allowed for gain-of-function research in the lab that we know is capable of creating COVID-19 in the lab, created the first time in the Wuhan lab, and then unleashed on the whole dang world, turning it upside down, causing much death, destruction, injury, all kinds of disruption, just terrible. And this guy was complicit, in my view, in it. The company Tractor Supply, this one was disappointing. There's a man with an America-themed hot dog catering business in North Carolina. He maintains that he was banned from all Tractor Supply properties because he is a Trump supporter. He says he used to feed the employees at the store for free all American hot dogs and catering. He shared his story in a video along with the flyer for his company, advertising flyer, serving North Carolina. I'm a little surprised about Tractor Supply. I seem to recall, though, during the cancel culture era, didn't they do something crazy you and I talked about? It seems like they were sort of joining the chorus there, as I recall. I know Home Depot had some crazy stuff going on back then as well with their little white supremacy training, white culture training, and all that stuff. Here at home as well, Governor Reeves appointed a new Mississippi Supreme Court justice from South Haven. Celeste Embry Wilson is moving up to the Mississippi Supreme Court. Wilson is a circuit court judge from DeSoto County, filling a vacancy left by a former justice's ascension to the federal judgeship. I think we have one more vacancy, right, on the high court in Mississippi that still remains. So that's kind of news. Also, we've talked a fair amount about property taxes on this program. I call it the tax that everybody hates. Car tax, it is true. We have the second highest car tax in the country, but you also have to think about the overall tax burden. We have combined one of the lowest sales tax rates in the country. We have very low income tax rates, and our real property taxes are low, certainly compared to the neighboring states and in this part of the country, and way lower than the Northeast and the West Coast property tax rates. But there's some folks that are in the political fray that would like to adjust that, but the ad valorem taxes on vehicles, lowering your car tax, but that their plan there is for the legislature to cover some $350 million that goes to districts, counties, and cities. That's a math problem. Back with you tomorrow. Stay safe and God bless.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.